Just 1 week, he whispered. The billionaire's request changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to tonight's story. Rain streaked across the windows of a quiet cafe in downtown Seattle. The clock above the counter read 9:07 p.m. when Lena Tran wiped the last table, her hands trembling from exhaustion. The rain outside mirrored her thoughts, heavy, endless, and cold. She had worked a double shift, yet her paycheck would barely cover the week's rent, let alone her mother's medical bills. She was reaching for her coat when the door chimed. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped in, the scent of rain and cedar trailing behind him. His presence seemed out of place in the small cafe. He scanned the empty room, his gaze sharp, deliberate, until it landed on her. "Miss Tran?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Lena blinked. "Yes, that is me. We are closing in 5 minutes." "I know," he said, walking closer. "I am Adrian Hale." The name hit her like a bell. Adrian Hale, the billionaire investor she had seen once on the news. The one known for his ruthless takeovers and perfect composure. She looked at her worn apron, her damp shoes, and back at him, wondering if this was some sort of mistake. "I do not understand," she murmured. He set a leather envelope on the table between them. "It is a contract." Lena frowned. "A contract for what?" "For 1 week," he said simply. "I need someone to stand beside me. Pretend to be my fiancé." "No," she almost laughed. "You are joking." "I never joke about business," he replied. His tone was flat, but his eyes, gray, unreadable, watched her closely. "In exchange, your mother's hospital debt will be cleared. I will pay your rent for the next 6 months. And when the week is over, you walk away. No strings." Lena's breath caught. It sounded too absurd to be real. "Why me?" "Because you are ordinary," he said, as if that were an advantage. "You do not belong to my world, which makes you believable." He reached into the envelope and slid a small silver ring across the table. The metal was cold under the cafe's dim light. "Just 1 week," he whispered. The words hung between them, soft but impossible to ignore. The rain outside grew heavier, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold. Lena looked down at her hands, calloused from years of work, trembling now over the ring. She wanted to refuse, to tell him this was insane, but behind her eyelids flashed the image of her mother lying in a hospital bed, pale and breathless, waiting for another overdue payment. Her voice was barely a whisper. "What are the rules?" Adrian's jaw tightened. 5 of them, he said. "No intimacy, no interference in my business, no breaking character in public. You will attend 4 events as my partner, and on the 7th day, you will disappear." He paused, then added, "You will sign tonight." For a long moment, all she could hear was the ticking of the clock and the hum of the rain. Then she nodded slowly, as if sealing her own fate. "Fine," she said quietly. "But when it ends, I want everything in writing." Adrian slid the pen toward her, his voice barely above the storm outside. "You will have it," he said. As the ink touched the paper, Lena did not realize that this signature would change everything: her future, her heart, and the meaning of truth itself. Outside, thunder rolled through the night, echoing like a promise neither of them was ready to keep. The morning after she signed the contract, Lena woke up in a world that did not feel like hers. The black town car waiting outside her tiny apartment looked more expensive than everything she owned combined. When the driver opened the door for her and said, "Mr. Hale is expecting you," her stomach twisted. The ride through downtown Seattle felt endless. Her reflection in the tinted glass showed a woman who looked out of place. The barista apron was gone, replaced by a cream blouse and dark skirt that Adrian's assistant had delivered overnight. Her fingers brushed the silver ring on her hand, still cold, still foreign. When they stopped in front of Hale Tower, the city's skyline seemed to bow around it. Glass and steel stretched high into the clouds. Inside, the marble floors gleamed like mirrors, and every pair of eyes followed her. A receptionist smiled politely, but Lena could see curiosity behind the mask. Who was this girl walking beside Adrian Hale? He appeared from the elevator, flawless in a gray suit. "You are on time," he said simply. "I did not sleep," she admitted. He studied her face for a second, longer than necessary, then gestured for her to follow. "Come, you need to sign a few more documents." They walked through corridors lined with abstract art and silent employees. He guided her into his office, spacious, minimalist, and cold. The city shimmered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. On the desk lay a stack of papers, a fountain pen, and a single gold keycard. "These are your access passes," he explained. "My apartment, my driver, my calendar for the week. Read the terms carefully." Lena scanned the top page. Her pulse quickened at the bold heading. Engagement agreement. Each line was painfully specific: what to wear, where to stand, how to address him in public. "Do people really live like this?" she asked quietly. "In my world," Adrian replied, "every move is recorded. It is easier to control the narrative than to fix it later." Her eyes lingered on one note at the bottom. Clause 6, confidential appendix. A yellow tab covered most of the line. She almost asked, but his tone left no space for questions. "Your first event is tonight," he said. "A dinner with my family and board members. You will listen, smile, and speak only when addressed. Can you manage that?" She forced a breath. "I can try." Adrian's expression softened for a fraction of a second. "Trying is not enough here, Miss Tran, but it is a start." By evening, the transformation was complete. A stylist arrived with a gown the color of moonlight, subtle perfume, and a simple silver bracelet to match the ring. Lena barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked composed, elegant, someone who might actually belong beside him. At the gala, chandeliers glittered overhead like stars trapped in glass. Waiters moved silently between tables of senators, philanthropists, and executives. Adrian's hand rested lightly on her back as they entered. "Remember," he murmured, "smile with restraint." His father, a man of sharp features and colder tone, was waiting at the head table. "So this is your fiancé," he said, each word dipped in disbelief. "Rather sudden, Adrian." Lena felt the heat rise to her cheeks. Adrian did not flinch. "You taught me to make swift decisions," he replied. "This one felt right." Dinner was a storm of small talk and subtle interrogation. She answered questions about her family business and education abroad with lines Adrian had prepared. But when one investor asked her opinion on charitable spending, she forgot the script. "I think charity is only real when it changes someone's life directly," she said. "Not when it is written for publicity." The table went silent. Adrian's father frowned. For a heartbeat, Lena feared she had ruined everything. Then Adrian lifted his glass, eyes glinting. "Well said," he murmured. For the first time that night, she saw a flicker of something human in his face. Not the billionaire's mask, not the CEO's control, just a man listening to truth. When the dinner ended, he opened the car door for her himself. "You handled yourself better than expected," he said. "I was not acting," she replied softly. He looked at her, rain reflecting in his gray eyes. Maybe that is why it worked. As the car drove through the wet streets, Lena turned the ring around her finger. Somewhere between contract and pretense, she had felt a heartbeat she could not explain. And for the first time, she wondered what would happen if just 1 week was not enough. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the floor of Adrian's penthouse, soft but distant. Lena stood near the tall windows, staring down at the city that glittered below like another planet. Everything about this place was quiet, sterile, and perfect except her thoughts. The night before replayed in her mind: the dinner, the stairs, the strange feeling when Adrian had defended her. He had been cold at first, mechanical, but something in his eyes had changed when she spoke about real charity. She could still hear his low voice. "Well said." It echoed louder than the applause that followed. A gentle knock pulled her from her thoughts. It was Adrian's assistant, a woman named Claire, carrying a silver tray with breakfast. "Good morning, Miss Tran, Mr. Hale asked me to remind you that your schedule begins at 9. There is a media briefing this afternoon." Lena tried to smile. "Thank you, Claire. I appreciate it." Claire hesitated before leaving. "You did well last night. He does not usually let people surprise him." "Hello." After she left, Lena wandered into the kitchen, where a folder sat neatly on the counter. Inside were her talking points for the interview, and a handwritten note in Adrian's careful penmanship. "Remember, consistency builds credibility." She read it twice. It sounded more like advice for a machine than a person. Later that day, Adrian met her in the private garage. He was already waiting by the black car, phone in hand, expression unreadable. "Are you ready?" "I think so," she said. "Good," he replied. "Today is important. The foundation depends on how we appear together." As the car glided through the rain-washed streets, silence settled between them. She wanted to ask why this fad mattered so much, why a man with so much control needed to pretend. but his face was carved in focus, and she decided against it. At the studio, bright lights and cameras filled the air with tension. They sat side by side, a perfect image for the press. The interviewer smiled politely and began, "Mr. Hale, this sudden engagement has surprised everyone. What drew you to Miss Tran?" Adrian's gaze flicked to her for the briefest second before he answered. "She is genuine," he said, "and I value authenticity above everything else." Lena's heart stumbled. For a man who built empires on precision and profit, the word authenticity felt like a confession. The interview ended without disaster. As they walked toward the exit, Adrian leaned close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. "You handled that well," he said. "So did you," she replied. "Almost sounded like you meant it." His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "Careful, Miss Tran. People might start believing it." That evening, the penthouse felt less like a cage and more like a mystery. Lena changed into jeans and walked barefoot across the marble floor. She noticed a door she had not seen before, frosted glass with a keypad lock. It looked like an office. Her curiosity stirred. What was behind it? Why was it locked when every other room was open? She pressed her ear against the door but heard nothing, only silence and the faint hum of the city outside. Adrian appeared suddenly in the hallway, his presence sharp as lightning. "That door is off limits," he said quietly. Lena stepped back. "I know," he interrupted, "but some things are better left unseen." Their eyes met, tension crackling in the space between them. She wanted to ask what he was hiding, but instead whispered, "You have a lot of secrets, Mr. Hale." "And you have a lot of questions," he replied. "Both can be dangerous." The silence that followed was heavier than anger. Then unexpectedly he added, "There is a garden on the rooftop. If you need air, go there. It is the only place in this building that feels alive." Tamu. He walked away before she could answer. That night, she found herself on the rooftop under a blanket of gray clouds. Small lanterns lined the stone path, glowing softly against the drizzle. She stood there, breathing in the cold air, when she heard footsteps behind her. Adrian had returned, jacket draped over one arm. He offered it without a word. "You did not have to come up here," she said. "I could say the same to you," he replied. "You are not like the others, Lena. They follow the script. You question it." She looked at him carefully. "Maybe I am tired of pretending." He met her eyes, his voice low. "So am I." For a moment the sound of the city faded, leaving only rain and heartbeats. Then he turned away, his tone shifting back to steel. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be harder." When he left, Lena stayed under the gray sky, clutching the jacket that still carried his warmth. The contract had rules, but her heart was beginning to break every one of them. The next few days unfolded like scenes from a dream Lena could not wake from. Every morning began with a schedule fittings, lessons, media briefings, photo calls. The world saw her as a poised fiancée, walking hand in hand with one of the most powerful men in the city. But behind closed doors, she was still the same girl who had signed a contract in a cafe, unsure whether she had made the best decision of her life or the worst. Claire, the assistant, had become both her guide and quiet observer. "You are adapting quickly," she said one afternoon as Lena practiced her posture and speech. "Most people freeze under that kind of attention." "I am used to performing," Lena replied. "I just never expected the audience to be this rich. Yo." That evening, Adrian arrived home earlier than usual. He leaned against the doorway, watching as she tried to walk in her heels without wobbling. "You are improving," he said, almost convincing. Lena looked up from the mirror. "Convincing enough to fool your board?" "For now," he said, crossing the room. "But there is a difference between acting and becoming." She frowned. "And which one do you think I am doing?" His eyes softened slightly. "That is what I am trying to figure out." Chukwe. The following night was her first major test. The Hale Foundation's annual charity gala filled the ballroom of the Grand Monarch Hotel. Cameras flashed as luxury cars pulled up one by one. Inside, the air glittered with champagne bubbles and murmured ambition. Adrian took her arm, his grip steady. "Remember," he murmured, "you are not here to impress them. You are here to belong." The orchestra played a slow waltz as they entered the room together. Conversations paused. People turned to stare. She felt the familiar rush of anxiety, but Adrian's hand on her back anchored her. Throughout the evening, investors approached with smiles that hid sharp questions. They asked about wedding plans, charities, and the date of the ceremony. Lena answered gracefully, drawing from the pages she had memorized, until a reporter leaned forward and asked, "Miss Tran, what do you personally think of the Hale Foundation's future direction?" Her mind went blank for a moment. Then, against every instinct to stay silent, she said, "If a foundation wants to make a difference, it has to be more than a brand. It should reach people who cannot reach us, not just in numbers, but in compassion." A hush fell over the table. The older guests exchanged glances. Adrian's father looked displeased, but Adrian himself smiled faintly, the kind of smile that could hide 100 thoughts. "Well said," he said, repeating the words he had once used at dinner. When the speech ended, polite applause followed, and the moment passed like a ripple on still water. Later, as they stepped onto the balcony for air, Lena finally exhaled. "I think your father hates me now," she said softly. Adrian handed her a glass of sparkling water. "He hates everyone who reminds him he is wrong." She looked at him, startled. "And do I remind you of that too?" He met her gaze, the city lights flickering across his face. "Every day," he said quietly. For a long while neither spoke. The sound of the orchestra drifted from inside, a gentle echo of a world they both pretended to belong to. Then he turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "You did well tonight. But this is only the beginning. The board meeting is in 2 days. If you can earn their respect, the rest will fall into place." "Respect is not bought with silence," she said. He looked at her for a long moment before replying, "That is exactly what I am counting on." When they returned inside, flashes from the cameras followed them again. To the world, they looked like the perfect couple, but under the glittering lights, Lena realized something had shifted. For the first time, Adrian was not just protecting his image, he was protecting her. And that single truth was more dangerous than any lie written in their contract. The morning after the gala, Lena woke to the sound of soft rain against the glass walls. The penthouse was quiet, the kind of silence that made her heart beat louder in her chest. She slipped out of bed and walked barefoot to the kitchen, where a single note waited on the counter. "Board meeting at 10. Dress formally. Speak if asked. A.H." She folded the paper slowly. The night before still lingered in her mind the way Adrian had defended her in front of everyone, the flicker of pride in his eyes when she spoke from her heart. It had not felt like a performance. It had felt real. And that terrified her. By the time she entered the boardroom, the mood was colder than the marble floor beneath her heels. 12 directors sat around a long, polished table, their expressions sharp and curious. Adrian's father presided at the head, his gaze steady on her as if she were an experiment that had gone too far. Adrian rose as she walked in, extending a hand with practiced ease. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Lena Tran, my fiancée." The words still felt heavy, unreal. She smiled politely and took her seat beside him. The meeting began: numbers, profits, projections, words that meant little to her but everything to them. She stayed quiet, listening, until one gray-haired investor turned to her with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Tell us, Miss Tran," he said, "how does it feel to be engaged to one of the city's wealthiest men? It must be educational." A few chuckles followed. Lena felt her cheeks warm, but Adrian's hand brushed lightly against her knee under the table, a silent signal to stay calm. She straightened her shoulders. "It is educational," she said softly. "I have learned that money can buy almost anything except respect. That has to be earned." The room fell silent. Even Adrian's father stopped tapping his pen. For a second, she thought she had said too much, but Adrian's faint smile returned, calm and deliberate. "That," he said, "is why she belongs here." After the meeting, they stepped into the hallway lined with glass and light. Lena exhaled shakily. "Was that terrible?" she asked. "It was perfect," he said. "You made them listen. They will not forget it." He looked at her for a moment longer than necessary. Then he handed her a folder. "You have earned this," he said. Inside was a proposal draft titled Mobile Care Initiative. Her own idea from the gala, typed, formatted, approved for consideration. "You remembered?" she whispered. "I do not forget things that matter," he said. Later that evening, the tension between them shifted into something quieter. He found her on the rooftop garden again, the air crisp with drizzle. She was sketching the skyline on a scrap of paper, her hair damp from the mist. "You should not stay out here," he said, offering his jacket again. "I like the rain," she replied. "It reminds me that the world keeps moving, no matter how small I feel." He watched her, his voice softer now. "Do you ever think about what happens after this week?" She hesitated. "All the time." "Cubing. And what do you hope will happen?" She smiled faintly. "That I can leave knowing I was not just a name in your headlines." Adrian's gaze lingered on her face, unreadable, until the wind broke their silence. "You already are not," he said quietly. Down below, the city pulsed with light and noise, But up here, it felt like another world, one where truth and pretense blurred until neither could be told apart. For the first time, Lena realized she was no longer afraid of Adrian Hale. What scared her now was how easily her heart had begun to believe the lie they were living. When she turned to leave, he stopped her with a single line that stayed with her all night. "You were never supposed to change anything, Lena," he said, "but somehow, you changed everything." The following night, the city was wrapped in mist, and the penthouse lights glowed like a quiet lighthouse above it all. Lena sat in the living room, tracing the rim of a teacup between her fingers. She had grown used to the silence of this place, the way it held secrets instead of comfort. But tonight, it felt heavier, filled with something she could not name. Adrian came in without a word, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked more human than she had ever seen him. "Long day?" she asked carefully. He nodded and sank into the seat across from her. "My father is calling for an emergency audit. He thinks the foundation is being mismanaged." Lena frowned. "Because of me?" "Because of change," he said quietly. He never believed compassion had a place in business. But after last night, the board is starting to question his way of doing things. He blames you for that. "I just spoke honestly," she said. "I know," Adrian replied, his voice low. That is what terrifies him. They sat in silence for a moment. The only sound was the hum of the rain against the glass. Then Adrian rose and walked toward the window, staring out at the skyline. "My mother used to run a free clinic downtown," he said suddenly. "Before the foundation grew too large, she believed in helping one person at a time. When she died, my father turned it into a brand, a trophy for investors." Lena watched him, surprised by the softness in his tone. "You never told me that." "There are many things I never tell anyone," he said. "But you make silence feel like a lie." She stood slowly, crossing the room until she was beside him. The city lights reflected in his gray eyes, fractured and bright. "You do not have to carry it alone, Adrian," she said gently. He turned toward her, his voice almost a whisper. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to trust someone when everything in your world is conditional?" "Yes," she said, her heart tightening, "because I signed those conditions." Something in his expression shifted, the mask breaking for just a moment. He reached for her hand, and when their fingers touched, it felt like the first real thing between them. "You should not believe everything in that contract," he said. "Not all of it was written to protect me." Lena looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then dropped her hand. "Clause 6, he said quietly. "Forget it, it does not matter." "But it does," she said. "Why hide it if it means nothing?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "Because if you read it, you might walk away before the week is over." The air between them felt charged, fragile. He took a step back, running a hand through his hair. This was supposed to be simple. 1 week. Appearances. No feelings. "But feelings never follow contracts," she whispered. He looked at her, torn between fear and longing. "Then we are both breaking the rules." For a heartbeat, time stopped. The distance between them vanished. And though neither moved closer, the truth had already crossed the space that separated them. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, soft but certain. The storm was coming, and deep down, both of them knew that when it finally broke, nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning came without sunlight. Thick gray clouds pressed low over the city, and the air inside Hale Tower felt colder than usual. Lena woke to the sound of voices echoing from the living room. She opened the door slightly and froze. Miranda Cole, the Foundation's chief operating officer, stood in front of Adrian, holding a folder like a weapon. Her tone was sharp and polished. "You think you can manipulate the board with a fake engagement? The press is already suspicious, Adrian. They are calling her your publicity stunt." Adrian's voice was calm but hard. "Stay out of my personal life, Miranda." "Your personal life affects the company," Miranda shot back. "The investors want proof that this engagement is legitimate. They want a statement by noon, or the merger will collapse." Lena's heart pounded. She stepped into the room. "What merger?" Both of them turned. Adrian's eyes darkened. "You should not be here," he said quietly. "I live here, remember?" she said, forcing her voice to stay even. "Maybe someone should tell me what is going on." Miranda crossed her arms. "What is going on is that your little performance is about to cost this company millions. You think anyone believes a billionaire just happens to fall for a calf waitress?" Lena's face burned, but she stood her ground. "I did not ask for any of this." "Then walk away," Miranda said coldly, "before it ruins both of you." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That is enough, Miranda." She smiled without warmth. "You cannot protect her from this. The truth always leaks, and when it does, I will not clean up the mess." She dropped the folder onto the table and walked out, her heels echoing down the hallway like punctuation marks. When the door closed, silence filled the room. Adrian rubbed his temples, exhaustion lining his face. "She is right about one thing," he said. "If the media gets hold of this contract, everything collapses." Lena crossed her arms. "You mean your empire collapses, not you." He looked up sharply. "You think this is only about money? Clause 6 exists because there are people who would destroy everything my mother built to prove they can." "Then tell me what it says," she demanded. He hesitated, then turned away. "I cannot." Something inside her cracked. "You do not trust me. You never did." Adrian's voice broke for the first time. "I am trying to protect you, Lena." "From what?" "From the truth," she said, stepping closer. "Or from yourself." He did not answer. The silence between them said everything. When Lena turned to leave, he caught her wrist. "Please," he said quietly, "do not go out today. The reporters are everywhere." She looked at his hand on hers, then at his eyes, tired, guarded, and afraid. "I am not the one who is hiding, Adrian." She pulled free and walked out, the elevator doors closing behind her. Down in the lobby, flashes exploded like lightning as she stepped outside. Microphones surrounded her, questions colliding in the rain. "Miss Tran, is it true you were paid to pose as his fiancée? Did you know the relationship was fake?" Her breath trembled, but she said nothing. Somewhere behind her, the tower loomed glass, steel, and secrets. Inside, Miranda watched from the upper floor with a thin smile, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes," she said. "Send the files to the press. Let them see Clause 6. As the city erupted in headlines and whispers, Lena's reflection appeared on every screen. The world called her a liar. But deep down, she knew the lie had never been hers. It belonged to the man who had promised just 1 week, and somehow made her believe it could mean forever. Rain poured down in relentless sheets as Lena hurried through the downtown streets, the sound of camera shutters still echoing in her ears. She ducked into a quiet alley and leaned against the brick wall, her chest rising and falling. The headlines had already spread across every screen in the city. Fake fiancé exposed contract reveals Hale's deception. Clause 6. The hidden part of the agreement. She had not seen it, but now the world had. When she finally reached her small apartment, she found Claire waiting outside, umbrella in hand. "You should not have come here," Claire said softly. "The press is camped on every block. They are tearing you apart online." Lena's voice trembled. "Then why are you here?" "Because you need to know the truth," Claire replied. She pulled a folded document from her coat pocket and handed it to her. Clause 6 was not written to protect him. It was written to protect you. Lena stared at the page. The words blurred through her tears. "If the fiancée, Miss Lena Tran, participates in any public event that exposes her identity to defamation or media harassment, Mr. Hale shall assume full legal and financial liability to shield her from harm." She looked up, stunned. "He hid this from me." Claire nodded. "He knew you would never agree if you realized how much he was sacrificing. That merger Miranda mentioned it was his mother's foundation. The board wanted to sell it off to a corporation that would shut down its charity programs. He needed time to stop them. You were his chance to delay the deal." Lena's breath caught. "He used me to save his foundation." "No," Claire said firmly. "He used the lie to protect what was left of her legacy. But somewhere along the way, he started protecting you too." The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the world had not quieted. Hale Tower buzzed with reporters and flashing cameras. Inside, the board convened in a tense emergency session. Miranda stood before the group, ready to deliver the final blow. "Adrian Hale violated company ethics," she declared. "He falsified his engagement and manipulated public trust." Yokel. Then the doors opened. Lena walked in. Her hair was damp, her eyes clear. She carried the original contract in her hand. Every head turned as she stepped to the center of the room. "If anyone was manipulated," she said, "it was me. But I will not let this lie destroy the one thing that was ever true." She placed the document on the table. Clause 6 proves he never acted for gain. He took every risk himself. Adrian, seated across the room, rose slowly. His voice was calm, but filled with something new humility. "I never wanted you to face this," he said. "And yet here we are," she replied. He met her gaze. "I am sorry for every truth I kept from you." Lena looked at the board members. "He told me once that money could buy everything except respect." He was right. But respect comes from what you protect when no one is watching. The room was silent. Miranda's expression hardened, her plan crumbling. Lena turned to Adrian, tears in her eyes. You gave me a reason to believe in something real. Now I choose it for myself. And with that, she tore the contract in half, the sound echoing through the room like thunder after the storm. A month later, the city skyline looked different. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in every headline that once questioned them. The Hale Foundation survived the scandal, restructured under Adrian's leadership, and its first new project, the Mobile Care Initiative, was ready to launch. The opening ceremony took place in a modest park near the old downtown clinic where his mother had once worked. Tents lined the street, nurses moved between patients, and a new sign gleamed beneath the morning sun. The Hale Foundation. Care, not credit. Lena arrived quietly, carrying a small box in her hands. She had not seen Adrian since the day she tore the contract. Their lives had unraveled in public, but something deeper had held through the wreckage truth. When she stepped onto the stage, Adrian was speaking to a group of volunteers. He paused when he saw her, his expression softening in a way that silenced the noise around them. I was not sure you would come, he said as she approached. I almost did not, she replied, but I wanted to return something. She opened the box. Inside lay the silver ring, the same one he had slid across the caf table weeks ago. This started everything, she said quietly. But maybe it should end differently. Ho! Adrian took the ring, his voice steady but warm. You are right. It should not be a contract anymore. He reached into his pocket and revealed another ring, identical but smaller, engraved on the inside with a single line. No terms, no signatures, just us. Lena's breath caught. Adrian. He knelt, not with extravagance but with sincerity. I once asked you for 1 week, he said softly. Now I am asking for a lifetime. No business, no board. Just love, and the work we promised to do. Lamte. Tears welled in her eyes as the crowd fell silent. For the first time she saw him not as the man who hid behind contracts, but as the man who had learned how to feel without permission. She nodded, her voice breaking. Yes. Applause rippled through the crowd, but neither of them looked away. Adrian slipped the new ring onto her finger, and the moment felt quiet, grounded, real. Later that afternoon, they walked through the clinic together, past rows of patients and volunteers. On the wall hung a framed photo of Adrian's mother, smiling beside a handwritten note that read, Kindness is the only legacy worth keeping. Lena touched the glass gently. She would be proud, she said. Adrian smiled. So would mine. The camera crews captured their final embrace beneath the Foundation's new banner. The light shifted warm across their faces as the narrator's words echoed the heart of their journey. They began with a lie signed on paper, but ended with a promise written in action. In a world ruled by power, they chose compassion. In a story born from pretense, they found what was real. And as the screen faded to black, one line appeared beneath their names. True love and true leadership are not declared, they are proven.